The fluorescent lights of Sacred Heart Hospital buzzed overhead as Maya Rodriguez pushed her cleaning cart down the empty corridor. It was 3 in the morning, and the hospital felt like a different world. Quiet, peaceful, almost haunting in its stillness. She moved carefully, trying not to make too much noise with the wheels that always seemed to squeak no matter how much oil she applied to them. Maya had been working the night shift at Sacred Heart for almost 2 years now. The pay wasn't great, but it was steady work, and the hours allowed her to be home when her 6-year-old daughter Sophia got back from school. That mattered more than anything else in the world to her. She paused at room 312 and knocked gently before entering. The patient was asleep, an elderly man who had been here for weeks. Maya had gotten to know many of the long-term patients during her shifts. They often couldn't sleep and enjoyed having someone to talk to in the quiet hours of the night. As she emptied the trash and wiped down the surfaces, Maya's mind wandered to the bills waiting at home. The rent was due in 5 days, and she was short by $200. Sophia needed new shoes for school, and the old heater in their apartment had started making strange noises that worried her. Winter was coming, and she couldn't afford for it to break down completely. Maya had learned to live with constant worry about money. It had become as natural as breathing. Every decision she made revolved around stretching every dollar as far as it would go. She bought generic brands at the grocery store, cut coupons from newspapers, and had become an expert at finding the best deals on everything from clothes to school supplies. But tonight felt different somehow. As she worked, Maya found herself thinking about the conversation she'd had with Sophia the night before. Her daughter had asked why they couldn't go to Disney World like her friend Emma had over the summer. Maya had explained that Disney World was very expensive and that they needed to save money for important things like food and their apartment. Sophia had nodded with the serious understanding that children develop when they grow up knowing that money is tight. She never asked for expensive toys or complained when Maya packed the same peanut butter sandwich for her lunch every day. Sometimes Maya wondered if her daughter was growing up too fast, becoming too aware of their struggles too young. The next room was empty, which meant Maya could work faster. She liked the empty rooms because they reminded her that someone had gotten better and gone home to their family. It gave her hope that good things still happened in the world. Maya had met Sophia's father, Carlos, when she was 19 and working at a small restaurant downtown. He had been charming and handsome, full of big dreams about starting his own business. They had fallen in love quickly, the kind of intense young love that feels like it will last forever. When Maya found out she was pregnant, Carlos had promised they would figure everything out together. He talked about getting married and finding a better job. For a few months, Maya had believed that everything would work out perfectly. But reality hit hard when Sophia was born. Carlos struggled to find steady work, and the stress of having a baby put pressure on their relationship that neither of them had expected. He started staying out late with friends, claiming he needed to clear his head and think about their future. One morning, when Sophia was 8 months old, Maya woke up to find Carlos gone. He had left a note saying he wasn't ready to be a father and that he needed to find himself. That was over 5 years ago, and Maya hadn't heard from him since. The abandonment had been devastating, but Maya quickly realized she didn't have time to fall apart. She had a baby to take care of, bills to pay, and a life to rebuild. She had moved in with her mother for 6 months while she finished her high school diploma through night classes and looked for work. Her mother, Elena, had been supportive but firm. "You made your choices, Mija," she had said. "Now you have to be strong for that baby. She didn't ask to be born, but she's here now, and she deserves the best life you can give her." Maya had taken those words to heart. Every sacrifice she made, every extra shift she picked up, every dollar she saved was for Sophia. Her daughter was the reason she got up every morning and the motivation behind every difficult decision. Working at the hospital had taught Maya about resilience in ways she never expected. She saw families dealing with illness, loss, and tragedy every day. She watched people fight for their lives and saw the strength that emerged in the darkest moments. It put her own struggles into perspective and reminded her that everyone was fighting battles others couldn't see. Dr. Jennifer Walsh often worked late shifts in the emergency department, and she had gotten to know Maya over the past year. Dr. Walsh was one of the few people at the hospital who treated the cleaning staff with genuine respect and kindness. "How's Sophia doing in school?" Dr. Walsh asked as she passed Maya in the hallway. "She's doing really well. Her teacher says she's reading above grade level," Maya replied, unable to hide the pride in her voice. "That's wonderful. You should be proud. I know it's not easy raising a child on your own." Maya appreciated that Dr. Walsh acknowledged her situation without pity. She had learned to hate the look people gave her when they found out she was a single mother. The combination of sympathy and judgment that suggested she had somehow failed or made poor choices. The truth was more complicated than most people understood. Maya had made the best decisions she could with the information and resources she had at the time. She had loved Carlos and believed in their future together. When that fell apart, she had picked up the pieces and kept moving forward because that was what her daughter needed. As Maya finished cleaning the third floor, she thought about the dreams she had put on hold. Before Sophia was born, she had planned to go to college and study nursing. She wanted to help people and have a career that would provide financial security for her future family. Those dreams weren't dead, just postponed. Maya had looked into online nursing programs and community college courses. The biggest obstacle was time and money. Between working full-time, taking care of Sophia, and managing their household, there were barely enough hours in the day for sleep, let alone studying. But Maya was determined to find a way. She had started setting aside $10 from each paycheck into a small savings account she called her future fund. At this rate, it would take years to save enough for tuition, but she believed that small steps in the right direction were better than standing still. The elevator took her down to the second floor, where the cardiac unit was located. This floor was always quieter than the others, partly because many of the patients were sleeping and partly because the families who gathered here often spoke in hushed, worried tones. Maya had seen heartbreak on this floor. She had witnessed families saying goodbye to loved ones and celebrating miraculous recoveries. The intense emotions that lived in these hallways had taught her about the fragility of life and the importance of not taking anything for granted. Room 237 belonged to Mrs. Patterson, an 80-year-old woman who had been in the hospital for 3 weeks after a heart attack. Her son visited every day after work, and Maya often saw him sleeping in the uncomfortable chair next to her bed. Mrs. Patterson was awake when Maya entered the room, staring out the window at the city lights below. "Can't sleep?" Maya asked gently as she began her work. "I keep thinking about all the things I should have done differently," Mrs. Patterson replied. "All the chances I didn't take, all the words I didn't say." Maya paused in her cleaning. She had learned that sometimes patients needed to talk more than they needed medical treatment. "My grandmother used to say that regret is just love with nowhere to go," Maya said softly. "Maybe the things you didn't do were just as important as the things you did." Mrs. Patterson smiled for the first time since Maya had been cleaning her room. "You're very wise for someone so young." "I've had to learn fast," Maya replied honestly. These conversations with patients reminded Maya why she wanted to become a nurse. There was something powerful about being present with people during their most vulnerable moments. She felt called to provide comfort and care, even in small ways, through her current job. The cardiac unit held special meaning for Maya because it was where she had been born 25 years ago. Her mother had experienced complications during labor, and both Maya and Elena had spent several days in this same unit. Her mother often told her that the doctors and nurses here had saved both their lives. Walking these halls, Maya sometimes wondered about the nurses who had taken care of her mother during those scary days. Did they know they were helping to save someone who would grow up to work in the same hospital? Did they realize the impact their care had on 2 lives? Maya's shift would end in 2 hours, and then she would go home to their small apartment, catch a few hours of sleep, and wake up to get Sophia ready for school. It was a routine she had perfected over the past 2 years, a delicate balance of work, motherhood, and the tiny moments of self-care she could squeeze in between responsibilities. Their apartment was nothing special, but Maya had worked hard to make it feel like home. She had painted Sophia's room a cheerful yellow and hung up her daughter's artwork on every available wall. The living room had a comfortable couch she had found at a thrift store and carefully restored with fabric paint and new cushions. Maya took pride in their small space. Every piece of furniture, Every decoration, every small improvement represented hours of work and careful spending. She wanted Sophia to grow up in a place that felt stable and loved, even if it wasn't luxurious. The most important thing in their apartment was the small desk in the corner of the living room where Sophia did her homework every afternoon. It was just cereal and orange juice, but Sophia had arranged it on a tray with a flower she had picked from the small garden behind their apartment building. She had also made a card with a drawing of the two of them holding hands under a rainbow. "You're the best mom in the whole world," Sophia had written in her careful 6-year-old handwriting. Maya had cried reading that card, overwhelmed by love and the knowledge that despite all their struggles, she was doing something right. Sophia was happy, healthy, and secure in her mother's love. That was worth more than any amount of money or material comfort. As Maya finished the cardiac unit and moved toward the emergency department, she reflected on how much her life had changed since Sophia was born. She was stronger now, more focused, more determined. The scared 19-year-old who had been abandoned by her boyfriend had grown into a woman who could handle whatever life threw at her. The emergency department was busier than the rest of the hospital, even at 4 in the morning. There was always someone being brought in, always doctors and nurses moving with purpose and urgency. Maya had learned to work around the controlled chaos, staying out of the way while still doing her job thoroughly. Dr. Rodriguez, no relation, despite sharing a last name, was reviewing charts at the nurse's station when Maya approached to empty the trash bins. "Busy night?" Maya asked. "Car accident on Highway 95. 3 vehicles involved. We've got 2 patients in surgery and one who should be released in a few hours," he replied without looking up from his paperwork. Maya had heard the sirens earlier and wondered what emergency they were responding to. Working in a hospital made her more aware of how quickly life could change, how an ordinary evening could become a nightmare in seconds. This awareness had made Maya more careful about everything. She drove more defensively, kept a well-stocked first aid kit at home, and had taught Sophia basic safety rules. She couldn't protect her daughter from everything, but she could prepare her as much as possible. The emergency department also reminded Maya of the night Sophia was born. It had been a difficult labor, and at one point, the doctors had worried about complications. Maya had been scared and alone, wishing she had someone to hold her hand and tell her everything would be okay. But Sophia had been born healthy and beautiful, with a strong cry that filled the delivery room. The moment Maya held her daughter for the first time, everything else faded away. The fear, the uncertainty, the heartbreak of Carlos leaving. None of it mattered compared to the perfect little person in her arms. Maya finished the emergency department and headed back to the supply closet to restock her cart. The hospital felt different at this time of night, like a place where time moved differently than the outside world. She had grown to love these quiet hours, the sense of purpose that came from keeping things clean and orderly while others slept. As she prepared for her final rounds of the night, Maya thought about the conversation she needed to have with Sophia about Christmas. The holidays were still 2 months away, but Maya knew she needed to start managing expectations early. This year would be tight, even tighter than last year. Maya had been setting aside $5 from each paycheck for Christmas gifts, but unexpected car repairs had forced her to dip into that savings. She would need to be creative with gifts this year, maybe focusing on homemade presents and experiences rather than expensive toys. Sophia was old enough now to understand that they couldn't afford everything she might want, but she was also at an age where she was becoming more aware of what other children had. Maya worried about the balance between teaching gratitude and not making Sophia feel deprived or different from her classmates. The pediatric ward was Maya's final stop of the night, and it was always her most challenging emotionally. Seeing sick children reminded her how fortunate she was that Sophia was healthy. It also made her think about how she would handle it if Sophia ever became seriously ill. Room 418 belonged to a 7-year-old boy named Marcus who had been fighting leukemia for 6 months. His mother, Patricia, slept in the chair next to his bed every night. Maya had gotten to know Patricia over the past few weeks, and they had bonded over the challenges of single motherhood. Patricia's situation was different from Maya's. Her husband had died in a construction accident 2 years ago, but the daily struggles were similar. Making ends meet, being everything to their child, finding strength when they felt completely depleted. "How are you holding up?" Maya whispered to Patricia, who was awake and watching her son sleep. "Some days are better than others," Patricia replied honestly. "The treatments are working, but it's hard watching him go through so much." "He's lucky to have you fighting for him," Maya said. "Sometimes I feel like I'm not doing enough. Like I should be able to do more, be more." Maya understood that feeling completely. "You're doing everything you can with what you have. That's all any of us can do." These conversations reminded Maya that everyone was carrying burdens others couldn't see. The well-dressed businessman she cleaned around in the waiting room might be facing bankruptcy. The perfectly put-together woman visiting her father might be struggling with her own health issues. Maya's shift ended at 6 in the morning, just as the hospital began to come alive with the day staff arriving. She changed out of her uniform and walked to the parking garage where her 15-year-old Honda Civic waited faithfully. The car had been a gift from her mother when Maya first got the job at Sacred Heart. It wasn't much to look at, with fading paint and a few dents, but it ran reliably and got her where she needed to go. Maya had learned to do basic maintenance herself, watching YouTube videos to figure out how to change the oil and replace air filters. The drive home took 20 minutes through the quiet city streets. Maya enjoyed this time to decompress from work and prepare mentally for the day ahead with Sophia. She would have about 4 hours to sleep before Sophia got up for school. Their apartment building was an older complex in a working-class neighborhood. It wasn't fancy, but it was safe and well-maintained. Maya had chosen it specifically because it was in a good school district, even though it stretched their budget thin. The apartment was quiet when Maya entered. Sophia was still asleep in her bed, surrounded by stuffed animals and the books they had read together the night before. Maya stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her daughter sleep peacefully, and felt the familiar surge of love and determination that kept her going through the hardest days. Maya made herself a cup of coffee and sat at the small kitchen table to pay bills. This was always the hardest part of her day, facing the reality of their financial situation and trying to make the numbers work. The rent was $850 a month, which was more than half of Maya's take-home pay. Utilities, groceries, gas, car insurance, and Sophia's school supplies ate up most of the rest. There was rarely anything left over for emergencies or unexpected expenses. But they were managing. They had a roof over their heads. Marcus Blackstone stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office on the 42nd floor of the Blackstone Tower, watching the city sprawl out beneath him like a living map of his empire. The morning sun reflected off the glass and steel of downtown, creating patterns of light that shifted and changed with the passing clouds. At 31, Marcus controlled a business empire worth over $3 billion. Blackstone Industries had started as a small tech company his father had founded 20 years ago, but under Marcus's leadership, it had expanded into real estate, renewable energy, and cutting-edge medical technology. The business magazines called him a visionary, a disruptor, the golden boy of modern entrepreneurship. But success had come at a cost that Marcus was only beginning to understand. His assistant, Jennifer Park, knocked and entered without waiting for permission. She had been working for Marcus for 4 years and was one of the few people who could navigate his demanding schedule and intense personality. "The quarterly board meeting is in 30 minutes, she said, placing a tablet with his presentation notes on his desk. "The merger documents are ready for your signature, and I've confirmed your lunch with the Japanese investors." Marcus nodded without turning away from the window. "Cancel lunch. Move the merger signing to next week. I need to review the medical technology division reports first." Jennifer made notes on her device. She had learned not to question Marcus's last-minute schedule changes. His mind worked 3 steps ahead of everyone else, and what seemed impulsive to others was usually carefully calculated strategy. "Sir, the investors from Tokyo specifically requested, then reschedule them for dinner tomorrow. Make it somewhere impressive. The restaurant at the Four Seasons, private dining room." Marcus finally turned from the window, his gray eyes sharp and focused. "And give me everything we have on Sacred Heart Hospital. Financial reports, board members, expansion plans. Everything." Jennifer paused in her note-taking. This was unexpected. Blackstone Industries had investments in several medical facilities, but Sacred Heart wasn't one of them. Is this related to a potential acquisition? Just get me the information. Marcus's tone indicated the conversation was over. Jennifer left quietly, already making calls to gather the requested information. Marcus returned to the window, but his mind was no longer focused on the view. 3 days ago, everything had changed. Marcus had received a phone call that he never expected, about someone he had convinced himself no longer mattered. The call had shattered the carefully constructed walls he had built around his past, and forced him to confront truths he had been avoiding for 7 years. The caller had been Dr. Jennifer Walsh from Sacred Heart Hospital. At first, Marcus had assumed it was a fundraising call or someone seeking a donation. He had been prepared to transfer the call to his foundation's office when Dr. Walsh mentioned a name that stopped his world completely. Maya Rodriguez. Mr. Blackstone, I'm calling because you're listed as Maya Rodriguez's emergency contact in our system. There's been an accident, and she's in critical condition. Marcus had gripped the phone so tightly his knuckles went white. That's impossible. There must be some mistake. Sir, the contact information in her employee file lists you as her emergency contact from 7 years ago. I know it's unusual, but Marcus had hung up without another word, his hands shaking as he stared at his phone. Maya Rodriguez. The name he had spent 7 years trying to forget, the woman he had once loved more than life itself, the person he had walked away from in the cruelest way possible. He had told himself for years that he had erased her from his memory, that she was part of a past he had outgrown. But hearing her name spoken aloud had brought everything flooding back with devastating clarity. Marcus remembered the night he met Maya like it was yesterday, even though he had tried to bury that memory along with all the others. It was 8 years ago, during the darkest period of his life, when his father's company was failing and Marcus was working 18-hour days trying to save the family business. He had been exhausted, overwhelmed, and questioning everything he thought he knew about success and failure. On that particular night, he had been walking aimlessly through downtown after another brutal day of meetings with creditors and lawyers. Maya had been leaving her evening job at a small diner, and Marcus had literally run into her when he wasn't paying attention to where he was walking. She had dropped her purse, spilling its contents across the sidewalk, and Marcus had immediately knelt to help her collect everything. I'm so sorry, he had said, gathering up her scattered belongings. I was completely lost in thought. It happens, Maya had replied with a smile that lit up the dark street. Though next time you might want to try thinking while sitting down. It's safer for everyone. That smile had been the beginning of everything. Marcus had insisted on buying her coffee to apologize for his clumsiness, and one coffee had turned into 3 hours of conversation that felt more real and honest than any interaction Marcus had experienced in months. Maya had been 21 then, working 2 jobs while taking evening classes at the community college. She was studying business administration with dreams of someday starting her own company. Her optimism and determination had been intoxicating to Marcus, who was drowning in the cynicism and pressure of his father's failing empire. They had begun meeting regularly for coffee, then dinner, then long walks through the city where they talked about everything from their childhood dreams to their fears about the future. Maya had known who Marcus was. His family's financial troubles had been front-page news in the business section for months. But she treated him like a regular person, not a celebrity or a charity case. For 6 months, Maya had been Marcus's anchor in the storm of his father's business collapse. She listened when he needed to vent about impossible decisions, celebrated small victories with genuine joy, and reminded him that his worth as a person wasn't measured by profit margins or stock prices. Marcus had fallen in love with Maya's laugh, the way she bit her lower lip when she was thinking hard about something, how she could find something positive in even the worst situations. She had been studying in the afternoons at a small library branch near her apartment, and Marcus had started showing up there just to watch her work, amazed by her focus and determination. The relationship had deepened quickly. Marcus had introduced Maya to his parents, and she had charmed his mother with her warmth and his father with her genuine interest in business strategy. Maya's mother, Elena, had been more suspicious of Marcus, worried that her daughter was getting involved with someone whose life was too complicated and unstable. But Maya had believed in Marcus in a way that no one else did. When his father's company finally went bankrupt, When the media was calling Marcus's family a cautionary tale of overreach and poor management, Maya had stood by him without question. "This isn't the end," she had told him the night they lost everything. "This is just the beginning of something different. Something you'll build yourself." Those words had given Marcus the strength to start over. With Maya's encouragement, he had taken out loans against his trust fund, rented a small office space, and begun building what would eventually become Blackstone Industries. Maya had been there for all of it. The late nights coding in their tiny apartment, the weeks of living on ramen noodles, and hope, the first major contract that proved their concept could work. She had believed in his vision even when he doubted it himself. They had talked about getting married, about building a life together that would be different from the privileged but emotionally distant world Marcus had grown up in. Maya had shown him what real partnership looked like, what it meant to have someone who loved you for who you were rather than what you could provide. And then, success had started coming, and everything changed. The first major investor meeting had gone better than Marcus had dared to hope. Suddenly, people who had written him off after his father's bankruptcy were interested in his ideas. The business press that had mocked his family's downfall began writing articles about his innovative approach and phoenix-like rise from the ashes. With success came pressure to fit back into the world Marcus had grown up in but thought he had left behind. Investors wanted him at exclusive events. Potential clients expected him to look and act the part of a successful entrepreneur. And his mother had begun making not-so-subtle comments about Maya's background and whether she was really suitable for someone in Marcus's position. Marcus had tried to ignore the pressure at first. He loved Maya and believed their relationship was strong enough to withstand outside opinions. But as Blackstone Industries grew, the demands on his time increased exponentially. He was traveling constantly, working around the clock, and feeling pulled in directions he couldn't control. Maya had tried to be understanding. She had adjusted her own schedule to accommodate his travel, celebrated his successes without complaint about the time they cost her, and never made him feel guilty about the growing distance between them. But Marcus had begun to feel like he was living two different lives. During the day, he was the sophisticated businessman who could negotiate million-dollar deals and charm investors at black tie events. At night, he came home to Maya's small apartment where they watched movies on her old television and talked about her classes and his dreams for the company. The contrast had started to feel jarring rather than grounding. Marcus began wondering if he was holding Maya back from her own dreams, if she was settling for a life that was smaller than what she deserved. At the same time, he was being told by everyone in his professional circle that he needed a partner who could help advance his career rather than someone who needed to be protected from it. The breaking point came during a major industry conference where Marcus was being honored as Entrepreneur of the Year. Maya had been excited to attend, had bought a beautiful dress with money she couldn't really afford, and had been looking forward to celebrating his achievement. But at the event, Marcus had watched Maya struggle to fit in with the other attendees. She had been gracious and charming, but he could see her discomfort with the pretentious conversations and status-obsessed networking. When a prominent investor's wife had made a condescending comment about Maya's quaint background, Marcus had felt embarrassed rather than defensive. That night, lying in bed next to Maya, Marcus had made the decision that would haunt him for the next 7 years. He convinced himself that he was protecting both of them from a relationship that couldn't survive the pressures of his success. He told himself that Maya deserved someone who could give her a normal life, and that he needed to focus completely on building his business without the complications of a serious relationship. The next morning, Marcus had ended things with Maya in the cruelest way possible. Instead of explaining his doubts and giving her a chance to fight for their relationship, he had told her that he had outgrown what they had together. "I've realized that we want different things," he had said, the words feeling like poison in his mouth even as he spoke them. "I need to focus on building something bigger than either of us can imagine, and that requires sacrifices." Maya had been devastated, but not surprised. She had sensed his growing distance and had been preparing herself for this moment even while hoping it wouldn't come. "Is this about what that woman said last night? About my background?" she had asked. "This isn't about one person or one comment. This is about facing reality. We're from different worlds, Maya. I was fooling myself thinking we could make it work long term. The hurt in Maya's eyes had nearly broken Marcus's resolve, but he had forced himself to continue. I need to be free to make decisions based on what's best for the business, not what's best for us. And you need to be with someone who can give you the attention and stability you deserve. Maya had packed her few belongings from his apartment in silence, tears streaming down her face, but her dignity intact. At the door, she had turned back to look at him one final time. I hope you find whatever it is you're really looking for, she had said. And I hope it makes you happy. Those had been the last words Maya Rodriguez had spoken to Marcus Blackstone. Within a week, he had moved to a penthouse apartment across town and thrown himself into work with the intensity that impressed even his most demanding investors. For the next 7 years, Marcus had built Blackstone Industries into the empire it was today. He had achieved everything he thought he wanted: wealth, power, respect, recognition. He had dated women who fit perfectly into his professional world, attended the right events, and made the right connections. But he had never felt the kind of joy he had experienced during those 6 months with Maya. He had never met anyone who challenged him to be a better person rather than just a more successful one. And in his quietest moments, he had wondered if he had made the biggest mistake of his life. Marcus had occasionally heard Maya's name through mutual acquaintances. He knew she had finished college and had been working various jobs while apparently raising a child as a single mother. Each time he heard about her life, he felt a stab of guilt and regret that he quickly pushed aside by throwing himself back into work. 3 months ago, Marcus had been at a charity fundraiser for the Children's Hospital when someone mentioned Sacred Heart Hospital's need for funding to expand their pediatric wing. Without really understanding why, Marcus had asked about the hospital's staff and programs. He had been told it was a good facility that served the working-class community with dedication and care. Marcus had made an anonymous donation to Sacred Heart that night, telling himself it was just good business to support local healthcare initiatives. But, deep down, he wondered if Maya might still be in the area, if she might benefit from better healthcare options. Now, standing in his office 3 days after Dr. Walsh's phone call, Marcus was facing the truth he had been avoiding for 7 years. He had never stopped loving Maya Rodriguez. He had never stopped thinking about her, wondering about her life, hoping she was happy even while knowing he had caused her pain. The phone call had shattered his carefully constructed denial. Maya was in critical condition, fighting for her life, and she had apparently never removed his name from her emergency contact information. After everything he had put her through, after the way he had abandoned her when she needed him most, she had still kept him as the person to call in a crisis. Marcus picked up his phone and dialed a number he had memorized but never called. Dr. Walsh, this is Marcus Blackstone. I need to know everything about Maya Rodriguez's condition. There was a pause. Mr. Blackstone, I wasn't sure you would call back. Maya was brought in 3 nights ago after a serious car accident. She has multiple injuries including a traumatic brain injury, internal bleeding, and several broken bones. She's been in a medically induced coma since surgery. Marcus felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. What's her prognosis? It's too early to know for certain. The next 48 hours are critical. We're doing everything we can. I'm coming to the hospital. Sir, I should mention that Maya has a daughter. Sophia is 6 years old. She's been staying with Maya's mother. But the situation is complicated. Marcus closed his eyes. Maya had a daughter. Of course she did. Maya would be an amazing mother, giving her child all the love and attention she had once given to him. I'll be there within the hour. Marcus hung up and called to Jennifer. Clear my schedule for the rest of the week. Cancel everything except the emergency board meetings. And get me the best neurological specialists in the country. I don't care what it costs. Elena Rodriguez sat in the uncomfortable hospital chair next to her daughter's bed, watching the steady rise and fall of Maya's chest with the assistance of the ventilator. The machines surrounding Maya beeped and hummed constantly, a mechanical symphony that had become the soundtrack of Elena's life for the past 3 days. Maya looked so small in the hospital bed, dwarfed by the tubes and wires that were keeping her alive. The left side of her face was swollen and bruised from the impact, and her left arm was in a cast from her wrist to her shoulder. But what worried Elena most was how still Maya was. Her daughter had always been full of movement and energy, even in sleep. Dr. Jennifer Walsh entered the room quietly, carrying Maya's chart. Elena had grown to appreciate the young doctor's direct but compassionate approach to communication. Unlike some of the other doctors, Dr. Walsh never talked down to her or used medical terms without explanation. "How is she today?" Elena asked, though she could see the answer in Dr. Walsh's expression. "Her vital signs are stable, which is encouraging. The swelling in her brain hasn't increased, and her other injuries are healing as expected. But she hasn't shown any signs of waking up on her own." Elena nodded, trying to process information that never got easier to hear. "And Sophia? Have you heard anything about Sophia?" This was Elena's biggest worry. 6-year-old Sophia had been staying with Elena since the accident, but Elena knew she couldn't provide the kind of care Sophia needed long-term. At 72, with arthritis in her hands and high blood pressure, Elena was struggling to keep up with an energetic first grader. More importantly, Sophia was traumatized by what had happened to her mother. She barely spoke, refused to eat much, and woke up crying several nights. Elena had tried to comfort her granddaughter, but she knew Sophia needed professional help and stability that Elena couldn't provide on her limited retirement income. "I've been in touch with Child Protective Services," Dr. Walsh said carefully. "They understand this is a temporary situation, but they need to know what the long-term plan will be if Maya's recovery takes longer than expected." The unspoken reality hung between them. If Maya didn't wake up, if her injuries were too severe for a full recovery, Sophia would need a permanent guardian. Elena loved her granddaughter desperately, but she was honest enough to admit that she might not be the best option for raising an active 6-year-old. "There is something else I need to tell you, Dr. Walsh continued. "Maya had an emergency contact listed in her employee file from several years ago. I called the number, and he's on his way to the hospital." Elena frowned. "Emergency contact? Who?" "Marcus Blackstone. Do you know him?" Elena's face went pale. Marcus Blackstone. The name she had hoped never to hear again, especially in connection with her daughter. The man who had broken Maya's heart so thoroughly that it had taken her years to rebuild any kind of trust in people. "Yes, I know who he is," Elena said quietly. "But I don't understand why his name would still be in Maya's file. They haven't spoken in 7 years." He seemed surprised by the call as well. "But he's coming to the hospital this afternoon." Elena felt a surge of anger that surprised her with its intensity. Marcus Blackstone had waltzed into Maya's life when she was young and vulnerable, made her believe in a future they could build together, and then discarded her when she no longer fit into his upwardly mobile lifestyle. Maya had been devastated by the breakup, not just because she loved Marcus, but because she had truly believed he was different from other wealthy men she had met. She had thought he valued character over status, love over convenience. Finding out she was wrong had shaken Maya's faith in her own judgment in ways that affected her for years afterward. After Marcus left, Maya had thrown herself into work and school with an intensity that worried Elena. She had finished her business degree in record time, worked multiple jobs, and built a life that was focused entirely on achieving financial security and independence. When Maya had gotten involved with Carlos a few years later, Elena had been cautiously optimistic. Carlos seemed like a good man, someone who came from a similar background and understood Maya's values. But Carlos had turned out to be weak where Marcus had been cruel, abandoning Maya when she became pregnant instead of facing the responsibilities of fatherhood. Elena had watched her daughter rebuild herself twice after being abandoned by men she had trusted. Maya had developed a fierce independence and a wariness of romantic relationships that made Elena sad, even as she was proud of her daughter's strength. Now Marcus Blackstone was coming back, appearing at the worst possible moment in Maya's life. Elena didn't know what he wanted or why he would involve himself in Maya's crisis, but she was determined to protect her daughter and granddaughter from any additional pain. Elena's phone buzzed with a text message from her neighbor, Mrs. Chun, who was watching Sophia for a few hours. "Sophia is asking for her mother again. Should I bring her to hospital?" Elena typed back quickly. "Not today. Maybe tomorrow if Maya is better." The truth was that Elena wasn't sure whether Sophia should see her mother in this condition. The machines, the tubes, the complete stillness of Maya's body might be more traumatic for a 6-year-old than comforting. But Sophia was also starting to worry that her mother had disappeared entirely, and Elena knew that fear wasn't healthy either. Dr. Walsh checked Maya's chart one more time. I know this is difficult, Mrs. Rodriguez. But I want you to know that we're doing everything possible. Maya is a fighter, and that's working in her favor. Elena nodded. Maya had always been a fighter. Even as a child, she had faced challenges with determination rather than despair. When Elena's husband had died in a construction accident when Maya was 12, Maya had stepped up to help with household responsibilities without being asked. When they had struggled financially during Maya's teenage years, Maya had gotten part-time jobs and contributed to household expenses without complaint. Maya's strength had carried her through Marcus's betrayal, Carlos's abandonment, and the daily challenges of single motherhood. If anyone could fight their way back from a traumatic brain injury, it would be Maya. But Elena also knew that fighting required reasons to live, and Maya's primary reason was Sophia. If Maya woke up to find that Sophia had been placed in foster care or that her carefully constructed life had fallen apart, Elena worried about how that might affect her recovery. An hour later, Elena was in the hospital cafeteria forcing herself to eat a sandwich when her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize. Mrs. Rodriguez? This is Marcus Blackstone. I'm at the hospital, and I was hoping we could talk before I see Maya. Elena's grip tightened on the phone. I don't think we have anything to discuss, Mr. Blackstone. Please. I know you have every reason to hang up on me, but I need to understand Maya's situation. Her daughter, her medical needs, everything. I want to help. Help? Elena's voice was sharp. Where was your help 7 years ago when Maya needed it? Where was your help when she was working 3 jobs to finish college? Where was your help when she was raising Sophia alone? There was a pause. You're right to be angry with me. I made terrible decisions that hurt Maya in ways I'm still learning about. But right now, my mistakes don't matter. What matters is that Maya gets the best possible care, and that Sophia is taken care of. Despite herself, Elena was curious about what Marcus meant. I'm in the cafeteria on the 2nd floor. 10 minutes later, Marcus Blackstone walked into the hospital cafeteria, and Elena was struck by how much he had changed. The young man who had dated her daughter had been handsome but still somewhat boyish. This Marcus was clearly a man who commanded rooms and made decisions that affected thousands of people. He was impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than Elena's monthly Social Security check. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and he carried himself with the confidence that came from years of success. But when he approached Elena's table, she could see uncertainty in his gray eyes. Mrs. Rodriguez, thank you for agreeing to see me. Elena gestured to the chair across from her, but didn't offer pleasantries. Why are you here, Marcus? Because Maya is fighting for her life, and I have the resources to make sure she gets every possible advantage in that fight. Marcus sat down and looked directly at Elena. I've already contacted the best neurological specialists in the country. They'll be here tomorrow to consult on her case. We can't afford. You won't be paying for anything. Maya's medical bills, Sophia's care, whatever you need. It's already handled. Elena studied Marcus's face, looking for signs of manipulation or ulterior motives. But all she saw was genuine concern and what looked like deep regret. Why would you do that? You made it clear 7 years ago that Maya wasn't important enough to fit into your life. Marcus winced. I made the biggest mistake of my life 7 years ago. I was too young and too scared to fight for what really mattered. I convinced myself that I was protecting Maya from a life she wouldn't want. But the truth is I was protecting myself from having to be vulnerable. And now I understand that success means nothing if you can't share it with the people you love. I spent 7 years building an empire and telling myself I had no regrets. But I never stopped thinking about Maya, never stopped wondering if she was happy, never stopped loving her. Elena was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. She had always believed that Marcus had genuinely cared for Maya, which was what made his betrayal so painful. If he had simply been using her, it would have been easier to hate him completely. Tell me about Sophia, Marcus said quietly. Elena's expression softened. She's beautiful, smart, and absolutely devoted to her mother. Maya has done an amazing job raising her alone. Sophia is kind, curious, and resilient, just like Maya was at that age. How is she handling this? Not well. She doesn't understand why her mother won't wake up, why she can't live at home, why everything in her life has suddenly changed. And Elena's voice broke slightly. I love her desperately, but I'm not sure I can give her what she needs long-term. I'm 72, Marcus. I have health problems of my own. Marcus leaned forward. What would Sophia need for stability? A guardian who can provide emotional support, financial security, and consistency. Someone young enough to keep up with a 6-year-old and stable enough to provide the kind of home Maya worked so hard to create for her. What about Maya's father? Sophia's biological father. Elena's expression hardened. Maya's father left when she was a baby, and Sophia's father abandoned them when Sophia was 8 months old. Neither of them has been in the picture since. Marcus absorbed this information, and Elena could see him processing the implications. Maya had been abandoned by 2 important men in her life, and now Marcus was the 3rd man showing up with promises of help. I know what you're thinking, Elena said. You're wondering if you can make up for what you did by swooping in now and saving the day. But this isn't a business deal, Marcus. This is Maya's life and Sophia's future. You're right. But I'm not here to make a deal or ease my conscience. I'm here because I love Maya, and I should have fought for her 7 years ago. Marcus's voice was steady but emotional. I can't change the past, but I can make sure she has every possible chance for recovery now. Elena stood up abruptly. I need to get back to Maya's room. The specialist you mentioned, when will they be here? Tomorrow morning. Dr. Sarah Chun is flying in from Johns Hopkins, and Dr. Michael Torres is coming from UCLA. They're both experts in traumatic brain injury recovery. And after Maya wakes up, what then? Marcus met her eyes directly. That will be Maya's choice. I'll respect whatever she decides, even if she tells me to disappear from her life permanently. But I won't abandon her again, and I won't abandon Sophia. Elena walked toward the elevator, with Marcus following a few steps behind. She was torn between hope and skepticism, between gratitude for the help he was offering and fear of the pain he might cause if he proved unreliable again. When they reached Maya's room, Elena paused outside the door. She looks different than you remember. The injuries, the machines, it might be shocking. Marcus nodded. I understand. Elena opened the door and let him inside. Marcus stopped just inside the doorway, and Elena heard his sharp intake of breath. Seeing Maya connected to so many machines, her face bruised and swollen, was clearly more difficult than he had prepared for. But after a moment, Marcus walked to the beside and gently touched Maya's uninjured hand. Hello, Maya. I know you probably can't hear me, but I need you to know that I'm here. I'm sorry it took a crisis to bring me back, and I'm sorry for all the ways I failed you before. Elena watched from the corner of the room, surprised by the gentleness in Marcus's voice and the obvious emotion he was struggling to control. I brought some friends to help take care of you, Marcus continued, speaking to Maya as if she were awake. Dr. Chun is one of the best neurologists in the country, and she's going to make sure you get everything you need to come back to us. To Sophia. At the mention of Sophia's name, Elena saw something she hadn't expected. Marcus's eyes filled with tears, and his voice became unsteady. I know you've been taking care of Sophia by yourself, and I know how hard that's been. But I want you to know that she's going to be okay. Whatever happens, Sophia will have everything she needs. I promise you that. Elena realized that this wasn't the calculated gesture of a guilty man trying to buy forgiveness. This was someone who was genuinely heartbroken and desperate to help the woman he had never stopped loving. Dr. Walsh entered the room, interrupting the emotional moment. Mr. Blackstone, I wanted to update you on the specialist consultations. Dr. Chin's flight lands in 2 hours, and she'll be here first thing tomorrow morning. Good. I want them to have access to any equipment or resources they need. Cost is not a factor. Dr. Walsh nodded. I also wanted to discuss Maya's living situation for when she's ready to leave the hospital. Given her injuries, she'll need extensive rehabilitation and possibly long-term care assistance. Elena felt her heart sink. Maya's small apartment wasn't equipped for someone recovering from serious injuries, and Elena's house had stairs that would be impossible for Maya to navigate with a broken arm and leg. I've been thinking about that, Marcus said. I have a house in the hills with a first-floor master suite, wheelchair accessibility, and room for live-in care if needed. Maya and Sophia could stay there during her recovery. Elena started to object, but Marcus held up his hand. I know how that sounds. But the house is fully staffed, completely private, and I travel frequently for business. They would have their own space and independence, with access to whatever support they need. Maya would never accept charity from you, Elena said firmly. Then, I won't call it charity. I'll call it the very least I can do for someone who believed in me when no one else did. Dr. Walsh looked between Elena and Marcus, clearly trying to understand the complex dynamics at play. The important thing is that Maya has a safe, comfortable place to recover when she's ready to leave the hospital. We can discuss the details later. As Dr. Walsh left, Elena realized that Marcus's offer, however complicated, might be Sophia's best chance at stability during her mother's recovery. Elena couldn't provide the kind of care and support Maya would need, and Marcus clearly had both the resources and the motivation to help. But Elena also knew Maya well enough to predict her reaction to Marcus's involvement in her life. Maya had worked so hard to build independence after being abandoned twice. Having to accept help from the man who had hurt her most might be more painful than the physical injuries. There's something else you need to know, Elena said quietly. Maya never told Sophia about you. As far as Sophia knows, her mother has never been seriously involved with anyone except her father, who left when she was a baby. Marcus absorbed this information. How do I explain my presence to a 6-year-old? Very carefully. Sophia is intelligent, but she's also traumatized right now. She needs stability and honesty, but in ways she can understand. Elena looked at Maya lying unconscious in the hospital bed, surrounded by the machines keeping her alive, and made a decision that felt both necessary and terrifying. If you're serious about helping, if you're really not going to disappear when things get difficult, then I'll work with you. But I'm watching Marcus. If you hurt either of them again, I'll make sure you never get another chance. Marcus nodded solemnly. I understand. And Mrs. Rodriguez? Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I know I don't deserve it. As evening fell over Sacred Heart Hospital, Elena returned to Maya's bedside, while Marcus made phone calls to coordinate medical care. For the first time since the accident, Elena felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, her daughter would have everything she needed to fight her way back to the life she had built for herself and Sophia. But Elena also knew that Maya's biggest battle might not be against her injuries. It might be against the fear of trusting someone who had already proven he could leave when staying became difficult. The road to recovery was going to test everyone's commitment to redemption and second chances. Jennifer began making notes, but Marcus was already grabbing his jacket and heading for the elevator. He had spent 7 years building an empire, convincing himself that success was worth any sacrifice. But none of it mattered if he was too late to save the woman he had never stopped loving. The drive to Sacred Heart Hospital felt like the longest journey of Marcus's life. As he sat in the back of his Tesla, being driven through the city where he and Maya had once walked hand in hand, Marcus realized that he was about to face the consequences of the most cowardly decision he had ever made. He had told himself for years that he had erased Maya from his memory, that their relationship was a youthful mistake he had outgrown. But the truth was that every success he had achieved, every milestone he had reached, had felt hollow because the one person whose opinion truly mattered wasn't there to share it with him. Maya had believed in him when no one else did. She had loved him for who he was rather than what he could become. And he had thrown it all away because he was too afraid to fight for what really mattered. Now Maya was fighting for her life, and Marcus was racing against time to prove that love was stronger than fear, that redemption was possible even for someone who had made the worst possible choices. As Sacred Heart Hospital came into view, Marcus made a promise to himself and to Maya. If she survived, if she gave him another chance, he would spend the rest of his life proving that he was worthy of the faith she had once placed in him. The man who claimed he had erased her from his memory was coming home to the woman who had never left his heart. Food on the table, and each other. Maya reminded herself that many people had less, and she was grateful for what they had built together. As the sun began to rise through their small kitchen window, Maya felt the satisfaction that came with completing another night shift successfully. She was one day closer to her goals, $1 closer to a better future for Sophia. Maya set her alarm for 10:30 a.m. and went to bed, falling asleep to the sound of the city waking up outside their window. In a few hours, she would wake up to Sophia's excited chatter about school and homework and friends. It was a routine that gave structure and meaning to both their lives. Tomorrow night, she would return to Sacred Heart Hospital, push her squeaky cart down the quiet corridors, and continue working toward the dreams she had never abandoned. Maya Rodriguez was a fighter, a survivor, and, most importantly, a mother who would never give up on creating the best possible life for her daughter. She had no way of knowing that in just 3 days, everything would change in ways she could never have imagined.